Welcome to Your Number Man, the podcast where we dive deep into business, finance, and entrepreneurship. I am your host, Johan but you can call me Your Number Man. Over the years, I've worn many hats in the business world, from marketing ace to financial expert. And now I'm here to share my expertise with you. Each week, we'll explore strategies, insights, and stories to help you navigate the complexities of running a successful business. Whether you're a seasoned entrepreneur or just starting, this podcast is your go-to resource for all things business and finance. So grab a drink, settle in, and let's unlock the secrets to building and thriving business together. This is Your Number Man, where we help you achieve a bigger life in business. Welcome everybody for another episode, actually the third episode of Your Number Man. And today we are making history. We have our first guest today and a very special one indeed. His name is Rob Chisholm. Rob and I met in 2018 when we started working together on the AMMP program from Polaris. Rob will tell you a bit more about Polaris and this program very soon. But first, let me give you a bit of history about Rob's career. Rob has over 40 years of business experience. He started his first company at 27, and that was the first of several businesses to win local and national awards. Rob's talent for leading companies and his keen eye for holistic business operations gained him several appointments on company boards over the years. Rob is also a certified business coach and has worked for almost a decade with the government's Business Owners Coaching Program. In recognition of his outstanding contributions and service to small business in South Australia, Rob received the Order of Australia Medal in 1985. Today, Rob's perspective has been indispensable to shaping Polaris' program for business owners, including not only the AMMP but also Mentoring for Success and a Business Fundamentals program. Clients attribute his effectiveness as a mentor to his genuine empathy and loyalty to them. Understanding that trust is key, Rob takes his clients' business seriously and treats their matters with confidentiality and compassion. So without further ado, welcome to our podcast, Rob, and thank you for joining us today.
Oh, thank you, Johan. Thank you. I'm really pleased to be here.
Now, obviously, there's so much more. Is there anything that I've missed?
The Polaris Centre, that's where I work now. Just a bit of background there. Polaris is effectively a division of the city of Salisbury, and we take the work of small business pretty seriously. And I've been there since I sold my last business in 2008. I've been there, 15 years now.
Well, that's fantastic. You always talk how small business owners are the real heroes. Can you tell us a bit more about this and explain, in your view, the real contribution that we as small business owners makes to our communities and the whole world for that matter?
Yeah, well, as you know, we have a workshop called Business Fundamentals, which we run about every 6 weeks out at Mawson Lakes at the Polaris Centre. I make the story of heroes stand out because in Australia, who do we hold up as a group as our heroes? Mm-hmm. Who generally do we hold up as a group? And of course, the answer is sports people. And maybe, yes, they can be heroes. But in my view, the real heroes, the almost forgotten heroes, are business owners who start up something from scratch.
Yeah.
You know, they'll leave their day job, sell their house or mortgage their house. They'll borrow money. They'll sign a lease. They employ people. And I don't believe they get recognised sufficiently. I am grateful to our present state government, who is doing a lot in that area, encouraging small business. So, for example, when you start up a business with an idea, and hopefully that idea is adding value and what can add value to society, you're creating something that wasn't there before. You create employment that wasn't there before. You create taxes that weren't there before. You create human opportunity that wasn't there before. And so that's why small business owners should be recognised for the risks and the inventiveness that they make.
Wow. Yeah, I never thought about it that way. So we're a little bit like the unsung heroes. And I guess, we got to stand proud and feel really valuable to the communities when we talk about us as small business owners and really have confidence in our presence. The real hero of finance and a financial tool, I would say, is gross profit. And I know you and I are very passionate about it. And we both advocate that it's one of our most important areas for a business to track. You have been working intensively with business owners for the last 3 decades now, Rob. And you must have seen massive changes in the profits and cash flows of clients where you kept on drilling them to stay on top of and nailing their GP. So without, talking out of school, but can you give us a few examples of businesses that really dug into the GP, where they identified underperformance and how they really fixed it, and where are those businesses today?
Well, GP is, of course, gross profit. And the first thing
Correct.
that a small business owner has to do is to understand these terminologies and what they mean. So we've got gross profit, we've got net profit, and we've got terms like indirect expenses and direct expenses, and it's getting your head around that. And once you look at it, it's not so difficult and certainly not so frightening. So gross profit is simply your sales that you make, your gross sales, less if you're in manufacturing, less material cost and labour. And that labour can be even someone who's working in an IT profession doing work. So it's sales, less material cost and less labour, and that gives us a gross profit. There are other things that can be built in there like freight and stuff.
Yep.
But broadly speaking, that's what it is. Now, the reason why gross profit is so important is because those areas are the most difficult to control. Number one, sales. Right?
Yes.
And of course, we can't be responsible for GFCs or COVID, but we can then look at what are our material costs and labour costs. So that's why the gross profit is primarily, if I see a business that's in manufacturing and it's got a gross profit of 45% or thereabouts, hey, my guess is, rule of thumb, they're doing pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the expenses, they should be the easiest to control because they're fixed. So we call them direct expenses or fixed expenses, and they should be the easiest to control. They're not variable in the way that material costs are and or labour. And so that's why I bang on about, hey, what's your gross profit? What is it? Let's get it up.
Yeah.
And the ways that affect a good gross profit is, of course, your margin. What are you charging for your product? What are you charging for your hourly rate? Is that sufficient?
Yes.
If you're selling your services at $60 an hour and you're charging $70 an hour, you're going to be in deep trouble.
You will be.
Pretty soon. So that's why, in my view, gross profit is so important.
The way I see it is gross profit is almost like the engine room of your business.
Yes. Poor cash flow is generally related to sales, and then probably secondly, poor debtor control.
Yes.
But generally, it's sales. Let's face it, it all gets back to sales. If we don't have sales, we don't have a business.
That makes sense.
It's as simple as that. But there are so many things that affect gross profit. Of course, it's your margin. It's keeping an eye on what you're paying for your materials. It's keeping an eye on what you're paying for your labour. And include yourself there. If you're a single sole trader, what are you charging your own labour out at? Right?
Yes.
And then, of course, it affects efficiency. If it takes 2 hours to do a job that only should be 1 hour, hey, your labour cost is very high. Why? Because of the inefficiencies. So that's why, again, I wish I'd known this in my first business. If I'd understood this, I wouldn't have made the mistakes that I made.
Yes. Thanks for that, Rob. I suppose you probably read a lot of business books as well, because you're trying to get as much as possible from businesses. So the name Peter Drucker probably resonates with you. And I believe it's he who said, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. So by keeping this in context, and I know you are just as passionate about budgets as you are about gross profit, I think you almost go as far as to say that you are not interested in working with a company if they not have a budget or not willing to create budgets. Why are you so insistent that business owners should have budgets and work towards realistic budgets?
Well, you're right. Drucker was very popular back in the late 70s, early 80s. He was around the same era of the book called the Enterprise Myth?
The E-Myth. Yeah.
The E-Myth, yes. And a lot of good stuff came out of that era.
Yes.
And he's spot on. You cannot manage a business if you don't measure it. And of course, one way to measure it is your budget. So I say to my clients, imagine you're in an airplane. You're sitting next to the pilot and it's a dark night and it's cloudy and it's rough.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, the lights of your instruments go out.
Mm.
It's a pretty frightening thought that you could be heading into a mountain. Now, a budget is like your instruments.
Yes.
It's if you plot it, it's telling you whether you're on track. So if you haven't figured out where you want to go, which what a budget does, how on earth do you expect to get there? And you're right. If I take on a new client, which I haven't done for some time because I'm pretty full, but if I take on a new client and they're not prepared to do a budget, I'm really not interested in working with them. Because if they're not prepared to take the time to do a budget, then there's so many other things in their business that would be lacking.
Yes. What do you believe are the biggest mistakes business owners make today, and how can they make less of it?
It's not so much in the practical, it's more in the way business owners look at their business or see their businesses. You know, why would you leave a day job where you're getting paid good money and go and set up your own business with all the risks, all the restrictions, everything else that applies, and set out on your own business, right?
Yeah.
And so planning is essential, certainly long-term planning and short-term planning. But one of the biggest, not so much mistakes, but it's perhaps attitude or the way a business owner sees themselves, particularly tradespeople who decide to go and set up their own business. They don't see themselves as separate from the business.
Yes.
That's one of the biggest mistakes. The business should be seen as an entity in itself, and you happen to work for that business. Yes, you own it, but you happen to work for it. And that's why we recommend that you do form a company as soon as you can, because a company, which is recognised by our federal government as an entity,
Yes.
and you happen to be an employee, you happen to be a director, and you happen to be a shareholder. But it's one way of helping you get your head around that you are not the business. And then the next thing is to understand, again, this is going back to the Drucker, and more particularly the E-Myth.
Yes.
Gerber, his name was, who wrote that E-Myth.
That's right.
Is that you work on the business, not in it. So many times I come across business owners who are just so working Saturdays. I had a client working Saturdays, working Sundays. And I said, what are you doing this for? The guy was in his mid-50s. What are you doing this for? One of the best ways to sell a business is to make yourself redundant so that the new owner doesn't need you in the business, and you've established your team. And the particular client I was talking about, you know, he called me up one Monday and he said, Rob, I didn't work last Sunday. I said, wow, we're getting there. We're getting there.
Yes. You've got a wealth of information, Rob. And a lot of times, one of the biggest challenges of business owners is finding and training the right staff members. And they can sit on debating about who's the right person. They go through the CVs. And then you'll just like say, tell me, is this person an Errol? Some of them say, oh, yeah, he's an Errol. Or no, he's not Errol, he's Sue, or whatever. But what do you mean by Errol? What is Errol, or who is Errol?
Errol can certainly be male or female because it's spelled E-R-I-L. And it's an acronym. It stands for empathy, responsibility or responsible, initiative, and loyalty.
Oh.
Now, in a leader or an employee that has a certain amount of responsibility, the first thing you should look for is an Errol, because generally Errols are there. Whereas you can train a particular skill. They might have a degree in marketing, or they might have an MBA, or they might have all sorts of qualifications and degrees and doctorates. But hey, if they're not Errols, do not put them in leadership roles where they have to lead and guide people. So empathy, right? A leader's got to have empathy.
Yes. Taking
Responsibility and showing initiative and being loyal. But loyalty is a two-way thing. Magnet won't stick to plastic. It'll stick to metal. So the employer has to be worthy of that employee's loyalty. Someone once said, well, hey, shouldn't integrity be in there? Shouldn't maybe that be the I? And I said, hey, if you're loyal, right, wouldn't you have integrity? Loyalty covers so many
covers
of the,
everything,
of the
yes.
other attributes. That's why I work very hard to come up with the Errol concept.
Yeah, that's great. Now, I did mention that you are a qualified business coach, and I know you've also coached countless of business owners over the years. But lately, you've probably been more focused on being a business mentor. So what is the difference between a coach and a mentor? And can you also explain why you believe it's quite important for business owners to seek help through coaches and mentors?
Well, there's a lot of crossover, of course, between coaching and mentor. I initially started out back in, must have been 24 years ago, when I still was running my business. I had a business that made the mini scaff product, and I was working for the then Department of Trade and Economic Development here in South Australia. And we were doing business group coaching, where I had a group of 10 businesses. We would meet monthly as a group, and then I would work with each one of them during the month. I relate coaching more to what you would perceive a business coach.
Yes.
Like if it was a swimming coach or...
Okay.
And by and large, a lot of those coaches may not have even played the sport.
Yes, that's right.
So their ability is to get the athlete to their peak performance. And of course, that's primarily setting goals and targets. So coaching is a lot of hard work in my view. Mentoring is more for, if we were on video now, you'd see that I got white hair and a white beard. And
a red jacket.
And of course, for ladies, it would be generally white hair too. Maybe purple. So you've got to been around the block a few times. You've had to have the experience. Certainly you have to be an Errol.
Yes.
And that's in mentoring, right? Primarily mentoring is simply walking with the person, walking with the business owner, being there to answer questions, encouraging, guiding, sometimes taking the lead. I constantly say to my clients, you know I don't give advice.
I know that, yes.
Might come up with these are the options. Let's work through this together. If you want help with your budget, sure, I'll help you. But I'm not there doing what a coach would do if they were, say, training an athlete.
That's interesting. You can hear now, Rob is full of wisdom and he also knows a lot about ancient Greek as well. And our clients really, or his clients really, love the way that he just presents stuff, so much so that, one of our clients, Natalie and Trevor from Caltech, actually made a nice little book for Rob because he loves business, but he also loves old vintage cars. So they've created this beautiful book with photos, and then each photo of a beautiful car, and some of the cars are his as well, or most of the cars are actually yours in this book, but they've put a little quote underneath. I've actually got a book in the studio here, and we'll put something on Instagram for you people to have a look at this beautiful book. The first one I'm opening here is, there is no removalist van behind a hearse. So is this business related? This is an interesting quote that you've got, Rob.
Yes, well, actually the origins of that, I can't make claim to inventing that one. The origins of that come from you might remember the famous evangelist called Billy Graham.
I do, yes.
Well, his quote was, there's no U-Haul behind a hearse. But it's basically a removalist trailer or van. And so in the context of saying, well, what's your purpose in life here? When we do our business fundamentals workshop, and I would encourage any of the listeners to try and book in if they can find a spot, we ask a question in the beginning, what was your primary reason for starting your business? And we give them about four or five answers. They can only pick one. One is to make lots of money. One is to be your own boss. But one is to fulfill a passion.
Wow.
And when we see that they answer that to fulfill a passion, we then know that, hey, there's a bigger chance of being successful. Because when the going gets tough, and in a lot of cases for small business, it always does, particularly in the early months, then it's passion that will keep them going, not to make lots of money. Because we say, follow your vision, not the money, but the money will follow you.
Wow.
The idea of there's no U-Haul or there's no removalist van, you can't take it with you.
Yeah.
We human beings are on this earth for less than 100 years. We think we're going to live forever.
Yes.
Right? And, we have these short years on this earth, and certainly accumulating money, because the richest people in the world are not going to take it with them.
Yeah.
But if we see it more that we're stewards we're caretakers for what we have.
Mm.
And that means we're going to use it wisely in also sharing it. That's why I don't mind paying taxes, as long as the government's using my taxes wisely.
Yeah.
But most of my clients would understand.
I love it.
And that's why I was so
Yes.
touched when the client you mentioned went to all the trouble of producing that wonderful little booklet.
Yes. No, that's great.
I was very touched.
And they gave me a copy as well, and I got it next to all my other books as well. And when I get too bogged down into numbers, I just open it and read one of those sayings, and I feel better. And actually, one that helps is when you mentioned in one of them is understanding the problem is half the problem solved.
Well, put it this way: if we're faced with something and we don't know what's wrong, so if we don't even know what the problem is, where on earth do we start? And to me, that would frighten the living daylights out of me.
Yes.
I liken it to being in a room, and the only thing in the room, a table, you, and a snake.
Okay.
And the room's dark and black. Now, you're in most danger if you don't know the snake's in the room.
Ah.
Okay, that's not understanding the problem. But if you know a snake's in the room, you can then take action, maybe climb on a table or something. And of course, the best thing is to have the light switched on.
Yeah.
There'll always be snakes in the room. Okay, let's face it, that's life. But once we recognize that we have it in the room or that the light's on and we can clearly see it, then we can deal with it. And so not understanding the problem, to me, would be absolutely frightening. Once you understand the problem, then you can bring all your resources, your experience, your history, your colleagues, your friends, and more than likely, you're going to solve the problem.
Well, yes.
Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense, yeah. So then okay, there's a snake in the room, and what can I've got a table, but perhaps I can do something. I can actually look for a light switch as well. Or
that's a good point.
Or
maybe the light switch is a mentor.
Yeah, that's great. And it's like the budget as well. Or what Drucker said, you can't measure it, you can't manage it. All this beautiful stuff, it's all philosophical, but a lot of this relates to business as well. Perfection is unattainable, but in the search for it, you can achieve excellence.
Again, I can't lay claim to that. I've paraphrased it somewhat. But it came from an old, very famous American football coach who became a very, very popular business coach, and his name was Vince Lombardi.
Oh, yes.
And it really sort of puts it right on the line that perfection is unattainable. Crystals are perfect, but they're pretty boring, in my view. So perfection is unattainable. But what he says, if we chase perfection, we will catch excellence. And I use that again in my business fundamentals when I'm talking about synergy. And synergy comes from two Greek words meaning energy together, right? You
sync it.
You put the energy, yes, that's where the same root word comes from, synchronicity, or it means together. So syn and ergos means energy or power.
Fantastic.
So it's together power. So when we put our power together, 2 plus 2 doesn't make 4, 2 plus 2 can make 8 or 10.
Yes.
And that's when the magic happens, when you synergize those things. And that's what Vince Lombardi was getting at, that we're striving constantly to do better, that our reach should be beyond our grasp. So we're not satisfied with the status quo. I never achieved synergy in any of my businesses, certainly not the first one. The second one I got close. But it's something you never achieve. It's always something you're striving to do better.
Yes.
In your team, in the training, in the quality of your product,
Yes.
in the way you're perceived by your public. They're the things. And I'm sure that's what Vince Lombardi meant when he said chasing excellence. But you start with the idea, hey, I want to do better.
You can almost think about it as an Olympic swimmer, or no, not an Olympic swimmer, a really good swimmer, but mostly on state level. But that person say, well, I'm going to jump in this pool and I'm going to chase the Olympic record. I know I might not reach it, but doing that, I will probably be the best swimmer I can possibly be.
How many times have we heard about handicapped people who have serious disabilities? Like there was a story of a baseball player in the United States, he had one arm. I mean, wow.
Baseball in one arm.
And we look at the Invictus Games, and I just marvel at those people who have handicaps, very serious handicaps, and they achieve greater things than we able-bodied
Yes, it is amazing.
And where is it? It's all in their determination.
Yeah, a lot of the stuff is in your head.
And maybe being certain in their uncertainties.
Well, now can I ask you to talk about that?
Oh, right, you want to talk about that one.
Be certain in your uncertainty.
A client of mine who we have similar, how can I say it, spiritual understanding or belief. So that's really where it all came from.
Yes.
And I said this to her, and that's probably why she put it in the book. So it's really not business related at all, although it can be. It's more to do with, when everything's falling around us, and I mean falling around, not what's happening in the world today, which doesn't affect us in a direct sense in Australia as much. But when everything's falling around us and we go through at a time, marriage breakups, children being rebellious, or whatever happens.
Yeah.
In that uncertainty, what she and I shared was the common belief in like what we might perceive as a Father God.
Yes.
Right, who is always there for us regardless of what we experience day to day or the turmoil. And it's like rising above the turmoil, which is all the uncertainty. But in that uncertainty, we are certain of our relationship with that Father God figure. And that's a personal one.
Yes.
And unless it is personal, I don't see how it could be certainty. If we just say, oh, yep, there's the universe. Well, I wouldn't be certain. But when I can relate it on a personal level, I can have that certainty. That's why that got in the book.
Oh, well, that's marvelous. Yeah, I love that one. Also in the book, you're talking about, and I think this is you actually mean it quite firm, and I can see like the angry Rob is actually saying this, like nothing de-incentivizes and demotivates good employees more than to see a manager that puts up with bad employees. So do you mean like, come on, if you're a manager, you got to have a backbone. You got to be able to call the shots, and you got to be able to set somebody right when they've actually stuffed up, for that matter.
Well, it gets back to the error, because if that leader manager is an error,
yes,
then who should they be loyal to first? Now, in my view, their loyalty should not go to their immediate superior,
yes,
or the organisation for which they're working for, but to their team. So a good leader,
yes,
first of all, shows loyalty to the team that they're leading, because that person's performance is determined by the results his or her team. So therefore, if that particular leader or manager is putting up with bad behaviour, and I've seen this time and time again, it's such a disincentive for the good employees who want to do their work well, who want to come to work and enjoy their work and be productive. And they see the manager putting up with poor performance or behaviour or whatever. Nothing demoralises, decentivizes, demotivates than that. And again, I've had personal experience with that in business myself.
That's very true. It's like you've got this basket of apples you want to take to the market. Surely you're going to take out the rotten apple here or two. Otherwise, you're not going to get a price that you want.
Not only that,
yeah,
that infects the other apples.
It does. And it's my personal favorite when you said turnover is for vanity and profit is for sanity. Do you mind talking a little bit more about it?
Oh, wow. Yeah, I was so guilty of that in my first business. And as you pointed out, I started when I was 27 years old. And of course, at that age, it's all about ego and vanity. And in my first business, I was turning over probably the equivalent of 10 million today, employing about 50 people. I was in my early 30s, and I didn't understand these things we've talked about earlier about gross profit and direct expenses and indirect expenses. I didn't felt I needed to. I just leave that to somebody else. That's why it doesn't matter what you turn over. You could be turning over 20, 30, 40 million dollars. If you haven't got that gross profit under control, you haven't got your expenses under control, you're not using percentages. I'm a great believer in using percentages because they're a truer indicator than actual figures. Percentages don't lie.
Yes.
And that's why turnover, quite honestly, is insignificant if you haven't got all those other factors helping to create a profit.
Yeah.
And hey, let's face it, if you're not making a profit, you're not going to stay in business. If you're not going to stay in business, your employees are going to have to go, and your customers can't access the product or the service that you're providing. So every business has to make a profit. Profit is certainly not a dirty word.
Yeah, no, it's not. Almost think about it in a sense that we are in business, and like you say, sometimes for deeper meanings, for our purpose, and to really do a contribution to the world and to our communities. But if we don't have profit in mind, we're not going to reach our goals. So we might as well then basically just close the doors.
I think what you're doing here, Johan, is excellent.
Thank you.
It's helping maybe intenders who might want to start a business and think there's not a bed of roses. It is challenging. That's why we run this 4-hour workshop called Business Fundamentals, because we say in that workshop, we're here to challenge you. Hopefully, we're here to motivate you. We're here to inspire you. And we're here to inform you. But the challenging part is to say, hey, do you really want to do this?
Yes.
Are you prepared to take this on? Are you prepared to be committed?
Yes.
And perhaps lose some things along the way because of your commitment. We like to distinguish the passionate ones. So what I do at my old age, I'm in my 78th year, I couldn't wish for a happier life.
Yes.
What I share with my clients, I do have time to get up. I've got a place in the country. But my greatest thrill and blessing is to be able to work with my clients and also run these workshops. It was only last week my colleague and I were in Kangaroo Island. We were invited over there by the state government. Polaris was. We flew over there and ran a series of workshops and mentoring programs. Prior to that, they had us up in Mount Barker. And so our Polaris brand is now being recognised for the good work that we've done. I've really got to thank the city of Salisbury who initiated all of this. They just don't keep it to themselves. They now spread it around.
Yeah. And they have to thank you for initiating all these fantastic programs and keeping you together.
Oh, it's been a collaborative. It is. I couldn't have done it without their support. And it was their encouragement that got me, because I was going to retire. When I sold my last business 15 years ago, it was when Salisbury called me up and said, look, we want you to come out here and help us with the program that they had.
Yes.
So they gave me the foundation on which to do it, because I didn't particularly want to go and start up my own business.
Yes.
And so I'm very grateful to them for giving us the work, and for you for putting this together like this. Is a great idea.
Oh, I love it. I love it. And sometimes every morning I wake up and I just feel so much. And like you say, it's a bit of a blessing if you know that, all right, you're going to have a hard day today. You got to actually dig into some numbers today. Some of it might be boring, but I just feel so inspired to wake up and to then be able to go and talk to people about their businesses and actually see their passion coming in. And it's so great seeing you. You're just nailing it. Thanks for all your wisdom and that you are sharing it with us and our team today here. We really appreciate you coming in. There's so much more to cover. I think we should get you in a couple of months or in the next quarter, perhaps always make it a quarterly update with Rob, part of the podcast thing, I reckon.
No, I'd be very pleased to do it. One of my pet subjects is marketing.
I love it, yeah.
And I'd love perhaps next time around we could do some work on marketing.
Yeah, because this is not all about numbers, it's about business management. I mean, I'm an accountant, I'm a numbers man by trade. I love just seeing people grow and fulfilling their passion. We'll call it a wrap. I will make sure that your link is on the show notes in terms of the business fundamentals and the Polaris group. And if you don't mind, we're also going to put your detail of your LinkedIn profile on here, if you don't mind.
Yep. No, please go ahead.
Fantastic. Thanks everybody for listening to Your Number Man with our very special, enthusiastic and energetic Rob Chisholm today. And today's numeric is: Johnny got cash and bought a truck. He was hoping for an extra buck. Somehow the numbers got astray and the profit did not go his way. Now he wonders if his future is gonna suck. And that's a wrap. Thanks for joining me, and I hope today's session was valuable and you feel inspired to take action in your business. Remember, business success is about more than just numbers. It's about passion, determination, and a relentless drive to pursue your dreams through the help of numbers. So keep pushing forward, learning and striving for a bigger life in your business. If you found this podcast valuable, be sure to subscribe. Follow us on socials and leave a review if you enjoyed today's episode. And one last thing, if you want access to additional resources that will help you fast track your cash flow and financial freedom, visit yournumberman.com.au. Until next time, this is Johan Zanik, your number man, signing off. Thanks again.